In tomorrow's Dreamhack Bucharest semi-final, Envious from France will take on Cloud9, the North American team. And Cloud9's been in a pretty good run of form recently. They topped their group here. Admittedly, they only had to play Flipside and FaZe to do so. They managed to finish top 4 at Star Ladder. They're already top 4 at this tournament. They only lost to NIP at Star Ladder, the eventual champions of the tournament. They actually beat Envious, who admittedly had a stand-in sixer, on Cobblestone in the group stage of that tournament. And then before that at Northern Arena, Cloud9 finished second to Immortals, and it was a 3-map series, and certainly they had their chances to win that one. So Cloud9's in the better form at the moment. But what's interesting is, this is a great example of where I want to have a chance. Like, I wouldn't get on an analysis desk, unfortunately, because it's not time permitting in the current formats that we use, to really go into the pick ban of this series and how drastically I actually think it can decide the series. And essentially, if they pick ban correctly, and admittedly, you can't always know what your opponent's going to do. Like, they could do something unpredictable or something that doesn't necessarily even make sense for themselves as a weird pick. But if you go through all the different situations and you plan out what they could do, what they would do, I figured out the 4 scenarios that can happen here. And I think if Cloud9 play it correctly and do the approach I take, that they actually get a better chance to win the series, and they can win the series. But I think if they go with the default approach, or actually 2 of the 4 approaches, the main 2, which is probably the one that people would say they should and the one that they're expected to, I actually think they're going to end up with a draw. That means that they will lose 2-1 on the decider against Envious, even though on form Envious is a worse team at the moment. But I think in terms of the matchup, that the map pool works for the guys from Envious, and that's why it's going to be crucial for Cloud9 that they pick ban correctly. So what we're going to do first of all is look at these 2 teams and look at what their strengths are in the map pool, and then look at what they ban and what they pick, and then figure out how they'll match up. So let's talk about Cloud9 first. Cloud9's a team which, since they got automatic, their 2 best maps by far are Mirage and Train. Mirage, they're actually undefeated on LAN with automatic. They beat Heroic on it, beat Flipside. Train, they've only lost once, and that was to Flipside, who they've also beaten on Train. But Flipside, obviously one of Flipside's best maps is Train, and they've beaten Heroic here, they've beaten Immortals here. I actually think that Cloud9 in their own minds think of Train as being better than their Mirage, because so often they're in a situation where they actually pick it. This is like a key pick of theirs. Then again, though, when you're 5-0 on a map like Mirage, obviously people are going to ban against you as well. So beyond Mirage and Train, they're iffier on the other maps. Like Cobblestone, it depends on the opponent. They're good, like they beat Envious on it, but Envious had the stand-in. They lost to NiP, they lost to Immortals. Admittedly, Immortals and NiP obviously both really like Cobblestone. Overpass, they lost to Heroic, they lost to Immortals. They're okay on that. Dust 2, they've only played once with Automatic on LAN. They lost to NiP on it. NiP at the moment, very good on Dust 2. They haven't played Cash, they haven't played Nuke. So they're a team where Mirage and Train, we know they're going to pick one of these because the opponent can only ban one. And it's almost certain they pick one and that the opponent bans one. So we've got to think that. Then we know that Cobblestone and Overpass are the middle maps where they're going to have to decide which one of these is likely to be a third map depending on the opponent. So at the moment, Train is the map that they're picking the most. And then their other picks have been dependent on the opponent because no one leaves Mirage open to be in that scenario. Mostly, they are banning Nuke. They've banned it the last 8 straight times they could as a first ban. And after Nuke, they tend to ban Cash in the second rotation. They banned it the last 5 times. So we know that picking Train is extremely likely. Banning Nuke is almost certain to begin with. And then banning Cash in the second rotation, almost certain. So Cloud9 coming into this series looking very predictable. If you're Envious and you've done your basic homework, you will now know these 3 facts. They're going to pick Train if it's available. They're going to ban Nuke. And then they're going to ban Cash second rotation. So now let's look at Envious. Envious's best maps, they have 3 good maps and 2 that are really good. They're really good on Cash. They're 4-0 on that. I'm not including the Sixer tournament, that's separate, but they also won with Sixer at the one time they played Cash at Star Series. Over the last 4 times they played it, they're 4-1 on Cobble in the last 4 times they played it. Their only loss was to Fnatic, who obviously were fantastic on the map. We're talking about the Olofmeister, Crims, JW Fnatic. Those 2 are fantastic. Dust 2 has been a resurgence. They've gotten good on this map, which they never had been with the Kenny S era early on when they switched to Kenny S in autumn of last year. But now they've gotten quite good on that map. Only loss there was actually Fnatic in a weird fashion. And Train's okay for them, but because they've lost the last 2 on it, it's not a map they necessarily want to go ahead and play. They played Dust 2 also twice with Sixer, and the reason why that's also in the middle is because they won 1, they lost 1. They had a game against Vici and I forget who else. And so, probably G2, I assume. 16-14 games. And Cobble was a 1-1, also with Sixer. They lost to G2, won against VP. Obviously, winning against VP on Cobble's pretty impressive, but VP was slumping that tournament. Nuke, they've only played once. They lost it to Heroic, and we know that Overpass they don't play. Mirage, they've played twice, lost both, but overtime losses, so at least they were close. To Virtus Pro, very good Mirage team, and Heroic, we know that was obviously a close loss. So, coming into this series, we're in a situation where nV at this tournament has picked Train first when available, except against Heroic. Aside from that, they've banned Train twice. Oh no, wait, I got that wrong way around. So they picked Cash twice, rather. What am I talking about? No, they picked Cash once and they picked Dust 2 once at this tournament. Don't know why I said it like that. Okay, so Cash we know are perfect at the moment, and they picked Dust 2 specifically because it was against Heroic. They've banned Train twice of the 3 times they've had an opportunity to ban first at this tournament. The only team they didn't ban Train first against was actually against Heroic, and that's because they floated the ban to the second round where they banned it, and Heroic didn't pick Train, and therefore they're able to ban it there. Second ban that they tend to do is Overpass. So we know from these guys that they're going to pick Cash, most likely. They're going to ban Train, most likely. And the second ban, most likely going to be Overpass. So we're in a scenario where it's pretty different, right, from the guys at Cloud9. So we know Cloud9 wants to ban Cash second rotation. And we know that that's a threat for the guys from Envious to pick. We know that the guys from Cloud9 a threat to pick Mirage or Train, and we know that Envious bans Train. So immediately what we're happening here is each of them have got 2 really, really strong maps, and they're each going to definitely ban one of these strong maps, and so we expect the team is going to pick the other of the 2 strong maps that remains as their pick. So now what it's all going to come down to is if you're then left in a scenario where you're willing to do a clever ban on the second one to get the decider where you want it to go. So here's where it gets interesting, because in this scenario, the key detail for me is that the Cash ban from Cloud9 always comes second, except in one instance. I think it was against, let me have a look. It was only against Rogue that they banned Cash first. Everyone else, no matter who it was, doesn't matter. They played like 10 different opponents or something. And they banned Nuke first 8 times, the last 8 times. Including against Envious with Sixer. And we know that they'd won on Cash. So if we go to the expected ban, based on the numbers and based on the recent trends, the expected ban would go like this. Cloud9, as they did the last 8 times, bans Nuke first. Envious bans Train first, as they did 2 of the last 3 times. It's a map that they know is very strong for the Cloud9 guys. It's a map that it just so happens that these guys don't want to play anyway. So that would then leave us with the picks. Now, Cloud9, if Train's gone, should pick Mirage. We know it's not a good map for the Envious guys, although the losses were overtime losses, admittedly. And we know that the guys from Cloud9 love that map. So we would expect Cloud9 to pick Mirage. Then we would expect, since Nuke is the one that Cloud9 banned, Envious has their pick of whatever they want at this point in time, right? So Envious loves Cash and loves Cobble. So which do they go ahead and pick? Well, in this scenario, recent trends tell us they would probably pick Cash. That's a map that the guys from Cloud9 have not played on LAN with Automatic, whereas Cobble, we know they're like a middling team. That's like their 3rd best map. It's like a decent enough map for them. So it seems almost certain Cloud9 picks Mirage, Envious picks Cash. So now it's about the second ban rotation. Now in this world, we expect, since all the maps that are left is Dust 2, Overpass and Cobble, well, we know that Overpass is a map that Cloud9, if they have to play it, don't mind, and they've played it a bit online, certainly don't mind it against NA competition. We know that Envious themselves don't like Overpass, so we know Envious is probably most likely going to ban it because they do not play. So if you're Cloud9, you probably know that. So you know if you're Cloud9, it's really between Dust 2 and Cobble, because you can rely on NV to ban Overpass, recent trends say. So if it's between Dust 2 and Cobble, easy pick for Cloud9. They're going to ban Dust 2, so the decider is Cobble, because it's a map that they quite like. We know it's a good map for the guys from Envious, but Cloud9 is thinking we're willing to play them on that. Now, the problem there is that, okay, sure, you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, Thorin, Cloud9 beat nV-C9 on Cobble at Star Series. Yeah, they beat them when they had Sixer standing in. This is the problem with how the expected pick ban would go. On form, and maybe as a team at the moment, Cloud9's a better team than nV-C9. But in the direct matchup and the map pools and how the pick ban will play out, it will end up in a scenario where we have Cloud9 pick Mirage. I mean, remember, I'm having to decide that one of these teams picks first. So I've gone with Cloud9 picking first in each of these instances. Cloud9 picks Mirage. I think Cloud9 wins that. Cloud9, that's their best map in this sense against this team. I think that it's not a good map for the guys from nV-C9. I think that, sure, they can frag and be in it, but I think that should be a comfortable win for the Cloud9 guys, and they should certainly be able to win that game. So I think they can win that map. Then we go to nV-C9's pick of Cash. I think nV-C9 should win that one. It's not a map that the guys from Cloud9 want to play. They always ban it second rotation, but nV-C9 can pick it now. So I think you're going to go to a 1-1. So it's all going to be about that decider in this pick ban. And since that decider is Cobble, I think there's the problem for the guys from Cloud9. Because even if they beat nV-C9 before and they feel confident, I think nV-C9 is a better Cobble team than the guys from Cloud9 are. And you're allowing the decider to be essentially the second best map or one of the top two maps for the opponent. And so I think in this scenario that Cloud9, if they let that happen, will think to themselves, we don't mind playing Cobble. They'll go to Cobble. nV-C9 will win because ultimately I think nV-C9 has a better T-side. nV-C9 has a really strong T-side on that map. And I think that's where nV-C9 will win the series 2-1. That's the expected draw. Now here's the one where it's like, here's what should happen. So here's a way that you could think through the pick ban. If you're Cloud9, you've banned Nuke the last 8 times, but you know that nV-C9 have played Nuke only once, and when they played it the one time, they lost to Heroic. So you know nV-C9 is not a threat to pick Nuke. Now people might say, practice, don't care. They're not going to pick Nuke here in a best of 3 series with their tournament lives on the line. So what you don't do is you don't ban Nuke like Cloud9 would have done according to recent history. What you do is you bring forwards your second rotation ban Cash. Since you know the 2 best maps for the guys from nV-C9 is Cash and Cobble, you can play Cobble at least. You really don't like Cash. It's one of your maps you don't want to play, and you haven't played. Therefore, you ban Cash first, which leaves nV-C9 in a position where nV-C9, remember, they're likely going to ban, in this world, we had them before banning, let me see, before I had them banning Train, but I actually think in this scenario, it would make more sense if they ban Mirage, because at least they can play Train to some degree. This is Train is a much more playable map for nV-C9, especially going into the last major, than Mirage is. So you ban Mirage. Now when we come to the picks, Cloud9 will pick Train. Okay, they're giving up a little bit there, because, or rather, the guys from nV-C9 want that a bit more. At least they can play it. Still reasonable that Cloud9 is able to win that map. Then nV-C9, because Cash is gone, I actually think in this world, if you look at what nV-C9 have done recently, where they picked Dust 2 when they were against Heroic, I think, knowing that Cloud9 barely plays Dust 2 on land, they played it once with Automatic and lost to Nip. I think actually, since Dust 2 has become like a third map for nV-C9, I think nV-C9 is going to go ahead and pick Dust 2 here. So, okay, nV-C9 has got themselves a slightly better map from Cloud9 Train. Now Cloud9's got a slightly better map for themselves from the nV-C9 guys. Much better to play nV-C9 as their pick being Dust 2 than have it be Cash. So now we go to a scenario where we've got the second rotation. Now, if you're Cloud9 and you're so scared of Nuke, they didn't pick Nuke, now you can ban Nuke. Because in banning Nuke now, you leave nV-C9 picking between Cobble and Overpass. And you know they don't like Overpass, so they're going to pick Cobble because they like it. So nV-C9 bans Overpass, Decider is Cobble. Now in this scenario, Cloud9 has a slightly weaker chance on their map, but should still win. They have a better chance on nV-C9's pick, but I still would favour nV-C9. And then the decider is still Cobble, and so I actually, in this scenario, still have the guys from nV-C9 winning. Now here's the 2 other scenarios that can happen. And the reason why these 2 scenarios are key is because this is essentially what this whole video is about. We're thinking through all the scenarios, then we're thinking what the opponent will do, what the opponent could do, what you can gamble, float, and trick the opponent into doing to get favourable scenarios for you, any little edge you can. So these 2 pick bans are ways for Cloud9 to get better edges for themselves. So this is the one where this would be what I would do as a general rule. Like, assuming I take into account that Cloud9 don't want to play things they're really not comfortable on, I will at least put this scenario out there to say to Cloud9, in this series, because so many scenarios end up with Cobble as a decider, and I think nV-C9 has an edge on you there and will beat you, you want to try this pick ban to get into a world where you can actually win 2-0, and it doesn't matter about the decider. So here's the scenario that's interesting, okay? Cloud9 bans Cash. That's what I've already said they should do. Envious bans Mirage. I think both teams should do that. That's my opinion. So, I mean, assuming the teams do that, now, in this world, this is what could happen, okay? Cloud9 bans Train. Now, this is where you have to figure from both sides of the equation that teams can do different things. So I said Cloud9 can make it slightly easier there, but I also think this is where Envious sometimes might not necessarily play it the way Thorin would play it and pick Dust 2, like I said. This is where I think with those bans, sometimes Envious actually will think comfort for ourselves. We like Cobble, we think we're better on Cobble. Like I said, I think they are as well. And they'll actually pick Cobble here. So now you're in a world where it's Train and Cobble. Now in theory, that's actually a bit better for the guys from Envious than the possibility of Mirage Cash, which is what the expected scenario is. It gives Envious a better chance to win 2-0. But it also actually gives Cloud9 a better chance to win 2-0 because they can win Train, that's very doable, and Cobble, they've got a chance on, I think, and so I think they've got a decent shot to win 2-0 there. Then Cloud9 bans Nuke, Envious bans Overpass, Decider is Dust 2. Now, the Decider being Dust 2, I think puts it in favour of Envious more on the Decider, but I actually think gives Cloud9 a better chance to win 2-0, whereas if it's Dust 2 as the pick for Envious, I think Envious is going to win it. I think if it's Cash as the pick for Envious, I don't think Cloud9 can win it. So I think the best chance for Envious Cloud9 actually is when Envious do their own comfort pick and Cloud9 gets at least a chance to win 2-0 and then don't worry about the Decider as much. Now here's what will be the last scenario I'll present, the fourth scenario, and I would call this scenario the Thorin gamble because this is a mixture of what I think they should do, what they could do, and what ultimately I think comes to the most favourable map draw they can get, which goes like this. Cloud9 bans Cash, okay? You notice I say that in all my scenarios except the expected one where I think they might ban Nuke. Envy bans Mirage, again, what I think they should do. There's only going to be one change here. So Cloud9 picks Train, Envy picks Cobble. Here's where Cloud9 can do something here, and I think to increase their odds, is that they ban Dust 2 here, because the only maps we've got left is Dust 2, Overpass, Nuke. Now, we know that the guys from Envious, of those three maps, actually like Dust 2. It's like their third best map. Overpass, they don't really want to play it. That's a map where they haven't played it on LAN with this lineup for ages. Well, in fact, ever, I think. And then we know that in terms of Nuke, they only played it once against Heroic and they lost. So even though Cloud9 doesn't play Nuke and they ban it all the time, it's not like we can fear Envious in this scenario on it. So personally, I would ban Dust 2 to force Envious either to ban Nuke and bring in Overpass, which is better for Cloud9 than for Envious, but I think you can rely that the guys from Envious will think, well, at least we played Nuke and we hate Overpass, so they'll ban Overpass and Nuke will be the decider. Now, in this world, not only do you have the chance to win 2-0, because it's still Train and Cobble, but I also think that the decider being Nuke actually is better for you. Because I'd rather have the decider as Nuke than Cobble or Dust 2 as the decider, where you're going to lose on Dust 2, and it's actually, you've got a small chance to lose on Cobble, which I think I would bet on at the moment. So I think in this scenario, better to force them to either ban Nuke and give you Overpass, which is a benefit for you, or make them gamble and go to Nuke, and if you don't win 2-0 Cloud9, now you go to a third map, which neither team's good at, neither team wants to play, neither team really plays, and so as a result, I think that's a good way to even it out if you get to that decider. So there's two scenarios I think are really favourable. One's not bad, which is the one where they at least get Envious to pick Dust 2. And I think the expected scenario, what the recent trends tell us would happen, where it'd be like Cloud9 pick Mirage, Envious pick Cash, and the decider's Cobble. I actually think in that scenario, even though Cloud9 has a shot on Cobble, I think that Envious is going to win that due to their superior T-set. So this is a great example of where, when you go into that pick ban and you watch them play it, watch how they're picking. Watch whether they're picking on recent trends, whether they're trying specifically banning against the opponent, whether Cloud9 will gamble and float the Nuke, because we know that Envious is very unlikely to pick it, and instead get the Cash out the way. So that becomes less of a threat and give themselves a better chance. That's the number one thing they can do there. And then also watch for whether Envious picks, assuming Cash isn't available, picks Dust 2 to go with the weakness of Cloud9, or whether they pick Cobble and go with their own strength and use the standard Envious French arrogance. So those are the two things to really watch, and then look for a gamble on whether Nuke can be the decider, because I think this is a great example of where it doesn't matter that you're the better team and you're in better form. If you don't play the pick ban correctly, you put yourself in a more difficult situation and you give Envious a chance to beat you, which I think, according to the normal bans, they will.